Hello, everyone. Nick Provenzano here, Community Manager for School AI, and I am super excited for this Connecting the Dots episode where I will be joined by Ken Shelton and Dee Lanier, Ethics and Equity, AI in Education, a super important topic that I was able to chit-chat some at FETC with Ken and Dee, and Ken and Dee and I go way back, and we've had a lot of these conversations. I have their book. If you have not picked up their book, oh, is it going to block it? There it is. You can go ahead and pick this up. It's behind Ken as well. It's behind Dee as well. This made me question a lot of what I do practice wise and why I do what I do, which I know can be scary for teachers. And I am really excited for all of you here because you're saying you're open to being challenged and have new ideas. And I think that's what makes you awesome teachers. And something for me as a community manager here is to create opportunities, as I was talking to Ken about, for people to know better and then hopefully do better. And that's all we can hope to do as educators. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation. So we'll start off. Ken, say hello. Introduce yourself with anything that you want people to know.
Hello, buenos tardes, buenos dias, depending upon what time zone you're in. And something that I would want them to know, that I'm thrilled that we are able to have this conversation. And for those of you that are tuning in, I should stress the fact that the conversation we're about to have is pretty much the normalized conversations that Dee and I have, Nick and I have, and the three of us have together. And I'll just say my final comment to adjacent to that is that I think that type of nature of conversations is sorely missing in education. This is just, let's just have a real talk conversation and look at how we can uplift and support each other, identify problems and challenges, and ways in which we can support each other in navigating over, through, around, and under them if necessary.
Awesome. Dee?
In typical fashion, what Ken said. Yep. Um, so those of you who may not know, this book was actually born out of our conversations. Literally, Ken and I, we talk on a regular basis, phone call conversations, having lots of discussion about the sudden emergence of AI and generative AI specifically, and everyone being all excited about all the great possibilities with it. And we saw those things as well, but we were also concerned that no one was pressing pause to at least ask questions about things that could be or should be concerning to students in particular, students of color in most particular. And so in some of those conversations, Kim was like, "Dee, we should write a book." I was like, "Man, I don't know." But then as we started to just continue to see how things were shaping out, it just made sense. And then for any of you who happen to have a copy of the book, I'm going to give you one of the several Easter eggs that exist in it. And that is, if you flip near the back, you will see sort of an unmarked, nondescript QR code. If you haven't taken the risk to scan that QR code, then I invite you to do so, and you'll actually get to listen to some of our original conversations, which served as the manuscript for this book. All that to say, my name is Dee Lanier. I hail from Southern California. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. Glad to be here with you all.
Thank you, Dee. You guys are both in much warmer places than I am right now here in Michigan. 0 degrees, all bundled up in my basement. So it is a chilly one out here in Michigan, but I'm really excited to have you both here. One of the things here at School AI that we strive to do every day is to make school awesome for students and the people who support them by finding out what they need and making it happen. I'm very lucky to be in a place where this isn't just a sentence that's up on a wall. It's something we start with every week when we get together and remind ourselves this is what we do. And something for me as a community manager and a former teacher over 20 years, believing that I'm in a position where I want to elevate all voices, especially those who are speaking up for those who don't have a voice. And so having Ken and Dee in particular join us tonight is something that was very important to me and on my have to do list. For those of you that are new and are just joining us, brand new to School AI, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you are interested in joining our community, you can go ahead and scan this code. I know one of our awesome community coaches will drop the link in, schoolai.com/champions. It's an opportunity to get regular emails about these types of conversations we have. Once a month, I line up some rock stars in the community just to learn. And that's what I think a community should be about, connecting people with others you might not normally cross. And so please feel free to scan that, join the community, type it in. It's great. Again, we're here to talk about education and not just a product, because we're plenty of ways to do that, right? So we're here to talk about learning. And so one of the ways we can do that with our champions code word, for those of you who are in the community and are trying to earn your points and get some swag, the code word for today is equity. That is our code word. So please remember that when you fill out your points later. For those that are new and have no idea what that is, you earn points by completing challenges, and you can turn those points in at the end and possibly win a chance to head to, ISTE, ASCD this June in Orlando, and a one-day trip to Disney World with me, community manager, and 3 winners. So yes, I convinced my bosses to let me take people to Disney World as a prize. That's kind of an awesome date. Yes, depending on what state you're in the U.S. We already have Julia asking points. I believe I put the points for today at 20 points, just so we're all on the same page. So we are excited to get rolling here. I'm going to stop sharing so we can have you two guys on when you talk, so we can see all of you. So my very first question, you already sort of answered a little bit, which is great, because it was the why. Why did you do this? What made you dive into it? And again, I would encourage people to first get the book and then scan that QR code, because it's like cool. It's like you're a fly on the wall. Like you're just sort of like listening to these 2 awesome people have a difficult conversation, even amongst themselves, which is, I think, a sign of a good friendship is when you can do that. And I know I've had those conversations with Ken and D2 where you've done that. I see that Kim's on here. Kim and I talk a lot about accessibility and inclusion, and we have those like, oh my goodness, why didn't we just record this 90 minutes? Because this is a podcast episode. This is so it's really powerful. But when we talk about ethics and equity, so the big royal we, and whoever wants to jump in and answer this one first, go right ahead. What do those terms really mean, though, in the context of classroom? I think we hear ethics, we hear equity, and they're almost nebulous now, right? They're words, and some people view them as buzzwords. But what does that actually mean in the classroom? You guys are both super polite, so I'll call D first.
Right. Ken, you take equity, I'll take ethics. Which means you got to go first.
Oh, that means I got to go first? Okay. I mean, I think to the point Nick just shared for all of us on there, and I recognize many names, and obviously I've been fortunate enough to be able to have many fruitful conversations with a lot of folks that are here on this webinar, and probably folks that will watch the video. And before I get into specifics around that, I do want to stress that it's important to get different perspectives on things. It's important to establish common ground around some of the things you do. And without naming names, I've had many of those conversations, again, with folks that are on here, and my guess is folks that will watch the recording. And the whole idea around that, even when it comes to the conversation we're going to have, is to not look at a lack of information, lack of knowledge, or lack of understanding as any type of a personal indictment. It is, I want to understand, and the more I understand, the more I can have better perspective and better framing on the conversation that leads directly to my actions that I take. And if I can do that, then it goes back to our quote, Nick. It goes back to Maya Angelou. You do the best you can until you know better. When you know better, you do better. Dumbass. You will find the people that are bad faith actors that reject any interest in definitions, understanding, or what I describe as real world context. And then that's on the individual to determine whether or not they want to remove themselves from that conversation or expend any degree of personal capital in that conversation. So I say that because that comes up with equity all the time. And depending upon where you are in the US and in the world, equity is seen as some sort of taboo word and topic. And yet I'd be willing to go to Vegas and bet a very large sum of money that the folks that are in opposition to it can't define it and don't actually know what it means. And so I think in our context, for me to define it here, the most simplistic way I define equity is simply access and opportunity. How are we ensuring that students have access to learning for the opportunity to realize their full potential? And you notice I didn't even mention AI, I didn't even mention tech. It starts off with that. What access do I have? And based on that access, what opportunities does it create or does it assure me of having? And so in this context, it's really looking at artificial intelligence as what additional access barriers exist that through our ethical use of AI, our responsible implementation, and our practical implementation, what barriers does it now further remove with respect to learning access for the opportunity?
Awesome.
Yep.
Dee?
Again, yep. And I'll even see, some people saying in the chat, saw, I just lost it. So yeah, I was seeing Stella was saying, and Kim was saying, lots of the same things of, when we think about equity, we consider at the forefront, how is equity at the absolute forefront? And of course, many of us think about that from an access standpoint. And then of course, thinking about support, equitable support, consider how some may have access to certain tools and others not given that ability at all. And then even when access is given, what training support, what professional development for teachers, how are teachers also being guided in helping students and helping set up guardrails for the students and helping the students be ethical in the use of these tools. And of course, we always talk about equitable outcomes, but the outcome is based on the journey and the pathway in which you got there. And so if you're not setting up things from the forefront, then you're going to miss the mark on the end. And much like Ken said, we're talking about equity long before AI came on the scene. And when I was a high school business teacher, I was teaching my students ethics in the classroom, and that was really my responsibility. And here's the connection to ed tech. Me recognizing, number one, most of the time, whenever we share about whatever tools that we love, school AI, we recognize that we are advertising. We are, right? When we say that this tool works great and this is how it works, and then when we put different words on it, like this is the best tool, we are advertising. Then also recognizing that there are ed tech tools that have existed for years. I remember, like Adobe Suite and things like that, that regularly my students were hearing this is either the only option or what they were hearing was the best option. And so therefore, if I told them this is the only option or the best option and the price, the price of admission was inaccessible for them, then I also knew what their option was going to be, which was they're going to pirate it. And so I saw it as my responsibility to teach my students, number one, there are a breadth of different opportunities that exist to learn certain skills. And you have to ask ethical questions prior to doing whatever that thing may be. And so, it was chapter 4, my intro to business class, that we would always talk about, is it against the law? Is someone what if someone were to do this to me, and am I sacrificing the long term for a short term gain? We talk about that a lot in the book, and really seeing the opportunity with the emergence of AI as the ability to teach ethics, right? The ethical responsibility of media literacy, right? All of the opportunities that we have because of AI is what I really think that we should be taking advantage of now that it's here. It's like, oh, we have to press pause. We have to look at things differently. And instead of just saying, no, you can't, with full knowledge that likely they're going to, just because we said they can't, isn't enough. That's not good enough. And so we're going to have to teach ethics. And we can teach our students how to operate responsibly and efficiently and effectively. Those things being sort of secondary, tertiary, Unfortunately, too many people prop those things up as primary. But I would say effectiveness and efficiency really can be a byproduct of teaching equitably and ethically.
Well, I think what stood out to me in particular, and it was sort of like a flashing light, where you're like, well, if I tell them they can't afford it, they're gonna pirate it. Like you took that next step, and it makes me think about all the technology that's rolled out anywhere, where the students would have access to it, and as educators, well, just bury your head in the sand and don't worry about it, they won't use it. No, the kids are gonna use it, and they can either use it while being guided with proper ethical, approaches, and even a basic Google, teaching kids how to use Google searches or how to use Wikipedia, like those things, like what is ethical when you are doing research now. That
Right.
changed the game, and AI is no different. So when you talked about that, I loved how you made the intuitive leap of, well, A and B are happening. This is the logical course for C, and I need to prepare them for C. And so you give this perfect example of where AI lives in that sort of wash repeat of tech introduction into education. And so do you see this following the same path as all ed tech, or is AI really going to be different in how we rolled out, you know, tablets, Chromebooks, interactive whiteboards, Google, Element, like all of those things?
It's similar, but then it's also exponentially different, right? Um, I also think like if we don't teach our students how to utilize these tools correctly and wisely, which is our responsibility, like as educators, that's our job first and foremost. Um, then it's also a honeypot, right? It's a trap. When we say there will be consequences if you're caught, and we also know because of the trends of what education has been forever, we know who will be accused most likely, more likely, and we know that the consequences will be more severe for those who are accused, who are also found guilty, whether guilty or not, of such plagiarism. So the consequences on students long term and literally their livelihood is really what is at stake. And those were the conversations that Ken and I were having on the phone that I get fired up on. He's like, man, no, we have to record this and we need to start writing a book on this because everyone else is concerned around plagiarism in the light sense, and we're concerned about criminality, right? We're thinking about long-term consequences that can be a result of just simply not equipping students in how to utilize these tools wisely and how to use them at all. And then, of course, teachers not knowing how to use them. Then how are they, helping and supporting, and also not falsely accusing and all the other things.
Can our national system of education, which we know has lots of different areas for growth, but it seems to be set up with the mind like, hey, we want individual areas to educate in ways that are beneficial for your community. In theory, that seems like a great way for self-determination, et cetera, in terms of what you're going to learn. But when there are universal musts, how is that possible? I mean, is it possible in a system that is built this way to do these things where everyone has the same type of ethical training, professional development, or integration? You're shaking your head. I'd love to hear what you think.
So, and this is not limited to the geographical boundaries of the United States, by the way. I've seen this in international settings, primarily, in full disclosure, primarily international schools. Although, because without going into great detail, because I've had the privilege of working with both international and state-based school systems outside of the U.S., I see a replication of this pattern, and it's the following. So, to your point, we got all these. In fact, someone mentioned in the chat about a shared vernacular, which I'm in full agreement with. But we have all these. We have all this jargon. It's almost like the best way I can describe it is it's almost like educators have had to take as a part of their teaching certification, they had to take a marketing class to come up with as much fancy, jazzy jargon as possible that is both convoluted and confusing, so that way you don't get asked the follow-up questions. And what I mean by that is exactly what you just shared. And so this gets me, I don't know, yeah, as Dee put in the chat, what I would say is a word salad of jazzy jargon. And so in the context of your question, and keep in mind, this is not limited to artificial intelligence, inclusive but not limited to, are things like, how do you personalize learning in a standardized environment? How do you universally design for individuals? And what happens is it gets two things that I don't blame educators for, but it is something that we need to start to support each other in confronting, quite frankly, is you get these words that are almost like they are almost antonyms of each other. We need to personalize in a standardized environment. You want to universally design, but it has to be individualized. And so the whole idea of what I'm saying around that is it is very hard for educators to navigate within the boundaries and the constructs of systems that they lack any true agency. And oftentimes the people that are making decisions that most impact educators and students are so far removed from what's actually happening with educators and students that they don't have to acknowledge and own the consequential damages of the choices that they make. And so I say that because for us on this call, many of us were at FETC last week. It's how do we truly be innovative within the constraints that we are, that in many cases we have little to no control over. And so to your point, when it comes to things like equity, and I'll use my own classroom experience as a prime example. And I saw this in the chat. What's the minimum standard? So for example, minimum standard for me in class was students had to acknowledge where they were at the time that the class started. So at the beginning of the semester. And then I said, these are the standards. I don't expect you to know all of them. And quite frankly, I don't even want you to memorize them. But if you were to write to your future self what you want to be that isn't limited to learning of the content area, what would that be? Would you want to be in a position to ask more thoughtful questions? Would you want to be in a position to be a deeper critical thinker? Would you want to be in a position to be, what I describe as a strategic interrogator? Like I would give them this language and say, where do you want to be? And that's what you're going to commit to. And my job is to support you in that within the construct of the content area. So I taught social studies. So were things like asking thoughtful questions. So what are the things that the textbook is telling you? And what are the things that the internet is telling you? What's the difference? Whose story is being told? How do you authenticate and validate the credibility of those sources? You see that my limitations were the content, but to the point that was brought up, mentioned in the chat, innovating inside the box, that's an example of doing that. And by way of doing that, also what I will share, and I find it strange how many people are willing to die on this hill, is grading, equitable grading. So in other words, and again, what's my constraint? I got to assign a grade. Okay, fine. I'm going to play that game. However, I'm not going to use a 100-point scale, which I didn't. Think about that for everyone on this call. 59 of the 100 points represent failure. Like more than half. Okay, let's do real math. Okay, so no longer a 100-point scale, 4-point scale. And then also one of the things that I got in trouble for at my last school was I assessed the students and their numerical attachment to their growth that corresponded with a letter grade was based on where that individual student was and the growth that they demonstrated over every project and over the course of the semester. No averaging, and doing that. And what got me in trouble was at the end of that school year, the administration put the grade distribution of all the teachers, 85 teachers at that campus, put a grade distribution of all the teachers up on a slide, and then literally had the nerve to try to put me on blast in front of everybody like, why do you have 95% of your students getting an A? And I responded and I said, The question you should be asking is, why don't my colleagues have more students earning an A? What's going on in those classes? I can tell you why they're doing it. How much time you got? You want receipts. Every single one of those students has a digital portfolio. Every single one of those students can tell you where they were when we started the project and where they were at the end. And part of the summative assessment was reflection, which all of us know reflection is one of the most powerful. I would say reflection and feedback are probably your two most powerful guarantees of learning synthesis and learning retention across the learning cycle. And I told them, if you want to know what's going on, all the students email you, all 250 of my students will email you links to their digital portfolio where they made all their learning visible. So my point in sharing that and this whole thing is for us to start to develop truly an understanding of what does innovation look like within the constraints that many of us do not have direct control over. And that story, I have lots, but that was one example.
Dee, what do you think?
All right, so here's the problem whenever I'm on with Ken. So he says something that gets me super duper excited. And then I have to remember to just take a deep breath and to state what I was thinking calmly because it gets me amped up. So again, yes to everything Ken said. And there was something, early on in speaking about the word salad of jazzy jargon, right? How many of us as former classroom teachers, those of you who are present classroom teachers, that it's the expectation that you turn in lesson plans that are full of that jargon, right? How frequently is it the expectation that you create the most complex rubric imaginable, right? Like I remember grabbing rubrics from the pile at my former school and looking at it and laughing out loud. And they're like, what are you laughing at? I'm like, well, I'm laughing at these 6-point rubrics with language that I know that these third graders don't understand. And wasn't the point of this supposed to be for the students to self-evaluate where they are? Like we've kind of lost where we're supposed to be in all of this. And think about so many things have been set up, and it's a system, as Ken brought up, that I think that AI has brought in the biggest opportunity to positively disrupt, right? Positively disrupt. But unfortunately, what in many ways, because we're sort of trapped in this matrix of continuing more of the same, AI is just the fast forward button for replicating the things that have been dangerously and purposely negative in the past, right? And so, I'm just going to churn out even more of these lesson plans that aren't helpful actually to a student if they were to read it or review it, or to hand it to a parent to read it and review it. Going to create more of these worksheets for students to continue to have them produce busy work that has not been proven to be effective or helpful at all. I'm going to churn out even more multiple choice questions that, again, is a standardization. Standardized for who? We could stop there, but also what was the actual purpose and intention behind standardized multiple choice questions originally, right? And then, the sort of trick question things, like we can make more of these things. We can make them a lot faster, and no one's questioning whether or not any of it has been effective. And so what we have an opportunity now is actually to have multimodal opportunities for students to express themselves, for there to be a tool that actually helps us to evaluate our own lesson plans and to give us tips and understandings of how to reach individual needs. How it provides an opportunity for us to not only translate, but to change the language for multiple audiences. It allows us to have more open-ended responses, and for us to have tools that can help us notice trends and to help find ways in which we can individually help a student who may be picking up on certain components but not on others. It gives us lots of opportunities if we're willing to stop playing the game and continuing with the way things have always been. Those things have not been proven effective. So if they've not been proven effective, then why are we using AI to continue them? So that's my little preacher-mony. I'm done. Sorry, Ken got me hyped. I try to take a deep breath.
Never apologize for being passionate. It's the one thing
I,
that
I was just going to quickly add what Dee, because Dee's heard me say this in my workshops. I was going to put in the chat too. It's doing the same thing over and over again, and expecting a different result. There's a word for that. And the word that I use is not quite what you think. So for the international folks, they'll get a chuckle out of this. I say, yeah, the word I use for that is America.
well, I think what both of you just talked about and looking at the chat has clearly resonated, right? We have a chat filled with people that are like, oh, I want to do this thing, or oh my goodness, this is what I've been talking about. And I think the toughest part of all of this is deprogramming yourself from what you were taught good teaching was. And I know it was really tough for me because I think we all go in going, okay, I'm going to teach how I was taught because I know what I'm doing. So therefore it must work, right? Like it's that sort of self-fulfilling prophecy of like, well, I learned this way, so therefore others must learn that way. It was a really tough moment for me to say, wow, I'm actually not serving the kids that were like me. The neurodivergent kid that sat there and was not getting service, and I struggled to get through because I assumed it was me. And when you take that moment to go, no, maybe it's me, the teacher. Like, oh my goodness, like maybe my 50 question multiple choice tests that I'm giving out are not good practice. I had nowhere to turn to until the internet opened up and Twitter democratized a lot of those conversations. And I started to learn from a whole lot of people and said, meet people like Ken and Dee and go, oh, I'm not. Hold on a second. And then I learned about UDL and I'm like, I can make this available for everyone. Like this is game changing. And I think Dee, what you talked about with AI in particular, and I think Ken put it into the chat, is that all this is doing is speeding up bad practice in some way, right? Tech can speed up bad practice. Whether that is cool, I can get any worksheet I want at any time and give it to my kids. I need another crossword puzzle because I'm going to be out for this day. Like, it makes that more accessible, unfortunately. And I'm not taking a shot at all worksheets, everyone, so don't come for me. I think there are elements and times for some
You come for
students.
me. I said it.
And Nick,
there are,
if I could share a quote here, because
yes.
honestly, I mean, we're having this conversation. I think there is, and I love what I'm seeing in the chat. There is a degree of so let me share with everybody two things. One is a gaslighting tactic and a quote. So a common gaslighting tactic that you are seeing now, which by the way, I'm in one of my other books I'm writing, I literally have one full, which is turning into two chapters, literally devoted to gaslighting and education. I define it and I specify all the different types. And here's one example. What you're seeing now is a gaslighting tactic called gatekeeping via positional authority. I hold dominion over you, the learner, and I control your grade. And I know the grade is most important to you. So you're going to do what I say. I can force you to do that through coercion and compliance because that's the way the system is structured. And if you use your agency, which is hilarious to me how often we say we believe in student agency, I'm like, what kind of agency are we talking about? Because if I start asking the questions, which was me as a student, I started asking the tough questions. They were not received with, okay, you're a leader and you're asking tough questions. It was, you need to know your place, and we're going to use the levers of discipline, among other things on campus, to force you, to coerce you to be compliant with knowing your place. But my point with that is also that I do hear a lot of, and all of us on this call probably have heard this of, with AI, well, no, the kids need to suffer through this and they just suffer through that, and I had to do it and I was successful. And I'm just going to share a quote with you all on this because every time I hear all this, my focus is not on a counterpoint, it's to understand the psychology behind what somebody is saying. And the quote is, if you suffered in life and want other people to suffer as you did because you turned out fine, you did not, in fact, turn out fine. That was my microphone that I just dropped. So my point in sharing that is, I love what I'm seeing in the chat is AI has exposed a lot of stuff that has always been problematic. And the whole idea around that is maybe we actually need to hold a mirror up to ourselves and say, what are the things that I was forced to endure that I should not have been forced to endure? And how does AI remove, again, equity? How does AI remove some of those barriers? Prime example of AI and accessibility. I encourage teachers all the time. If you have students that are like me, that sometimes my brain is like this, and I don't know if it's ADD or what, but I know that I get ideas and I can't type as fast as the ideas pop in my head. I'm going to use speech to text to capture it, and then I'm going to use AI to organize what it captured. What's wrong with that? Oh, I have to suffer because I have to now write? I'm going to forget stuff.
It's cheating, Ken. It's cheating. You're
Yeah,
cheating.
well, save that for another webinar on. All I say, I don't get into cheating.
He's trying to get you fired up, kid.
Yes. So with that is I just respond saying, how do you define cheating? And by the way, your definition can include the words shortcut or competition or fairness. Fairness or shortcut. Can't include those two words. Now, how do you define it?
At FETC, I was in a cast session at the very beginning of the event, and a guy, he said something, and forgive me for forgetting his name. Maybe Kim remembers it. From cast, he pointed to his glasses and
Luis?
said, "Yes, it was Louis. Yes." He pointed to his glasses and said, "This is assistive tech. Is this cheating?" Like, it blew, it changed my whole view on tech, like, right, what we accept as technology and what we don't. I'm like, yes, I've got meta glasses, but also they're just my glasses. They help me see things that are far away that I can't see, and that helps me have an equitable access to seeing things.
Thank
and
you.
we take it all for granted. And so when we look at something like AI, using it exactly how you framed it. Like, I had a meeting with someone, in my note paper walked in, they go, "Oh, do you want this here?" And I go, "You know what? I'm still a little all over the place from FETC. I could really need this note taker in here so that I can go back to it." Oh, it was Kim, right? Was it Kim? I think it was Kim. I go, "I need this so I can come back to it because I'm sort of all over the place." And like, oh, of course, because it's viewed as, oh, this is going to help me be better at what I'm trying to accomplish. And I think, Ken, it is that gaslighting you're talking about, in that change of narration, like the narrative, right? What is the sole purpose of this tool? Is everyone going to use AI? No. There are some kids that are going to look at this and go, "I know it's in the textbook. It's right here. Like, I read it. Like, I have it." And then you're going to have another student who's like, "I know I saw it somewhere at some point in my notes. Let me use Gemini to go through all my notes and find like where it is really quick." Or let me use a school AI space and like refresh myself with what I talked about. Like, we want to encourage students to utilize tools to help them better understand whatever it is that they're tackling. And so I think it's so easy, like you said, I learned this way, and therefore you will learn this way. And it's because I think we've all repressed all of the horribleness that we encountered in the classroom.
Was school, I mean, I would even ask everyone who's here, and if you watch the recording, and I bring this up in my educator wellness workshops. How would you describe your experiences in school, K-12, higher ed, grad school, thriving or surviving? Which of those two was it? And sadly, more often than not, when people take the time to actually reflect on their schooling experience, it was a whole lot more of the latter than the former. And so my whole thing is, if you haven't gone through the process of reflection, recognition, reconciliation, repair, and restoration, then you are a lot more likely to replicate, I'm using a lot of R's here, the very same things that you would describe as you survived in the context of your students. AI is just another vehicle for that. But to your point also, Nick, I mean, this goes back to what Dee shared earlier, that I really encourage educators to do. This goes into the ethics. Students are going to use it. First of all, I encourage educators, don't use the C word. Ask students the following questions. So first of all, when are you consciously aware that your use of AI can compromise your learning? Okay. I'm not going to say cheating, compromise your learning. Okay. One example is cognitive offloading. Well, I think about it, but I don't want to, so I'm going to have AI do it. That can compromise your learning. That's number one. Okay, that's part of the ethical stuff that the ethical component that Dee shared, especially with that last question, which is, am I sacrificing long-term benefits for short-term gains? That question I would pose to students as well. And then the last one I would pose to students, if for sure, is if I were to draw a continuum and I have a line, this is a demarcation. Now it's replacing my thinking. Where is that line for you? Do you know? If you don't know, that's okay. Let's continually assess what are we doing? How are we using AI platforms? What are we using them for? What type of questions are you asking it? Are those questions that, with a little bit more effort, you actually might be able to answer yourself? Like, that's how you develop that ethical, conscious awareness so that students are not engaging in behaviors that can compromise their learning. And I personally think long term, it's really critical for students to start to develop that conscious awareness of where it's helping with my learning. And then now I'm going to stop when I believe it might actually be replacing my thinking. I just read an article that I want to, that Dee and I are, so Dee and I have had conversations about a second edition, and I want to include what I read and expand it and apply it in a contextual setting. It was an article that talked about AI imposter syndrome. Again, remember I mentioned I like to focus on not focus. I like to really analyze the psychology around all this, and the whole idea around AI imposter syndrome is remember that help me with my learning, replace my thinking. If you use it long enough to replace your thinking, you start to lack a degree of self-efficacy and self-confidence that you're actually capable of doing it. That's AI imposter syndrome. I can confidently say that I don't know of a single educator that exists anywhere in the world that would be okay with that. And so if we know that's our common ground, so if we know we're not okay with that, then now let's get into, as Kim put in the chat and you all talked, let's get into the responsive, relevant, and contextually applicable training. Let's get into the type of conversations we need to be asking to establish an ethical framework, or what I always describe as ethical leadership. Let's get into encouraging teachers. I don't believe in coercion or guilt and shame, but let's get into being transparent about when you're using AI and why you're using it with your students. Not that gatekeeping of you can't use it, but then conversely, you've got a teacher that's using it for that lesson planning, that feedback, and that grading. You see, that's how we can start to, we can raise the floor for everybody in that context and approach it thoughtfully, practically, ethically, and responsibly that is also sustainable.
Well, and I think what stands out to me is this whole conversation. So we're like 45 minutes in, we have a handful of minutes left. We haven't really focused on AI specifically. And I think that's the beautiful part of this conversation is that we're talking about a framework that really applies to all ethics and accessibility and equity issues in education, right? So while we can say AI 5 years from now, 6 months from now, we're going to talk about agents. Are we going to talk right that next thing? Like, oh, how are teachers using agents to grade, or how are students using agents to fill out their worksheets online? Right? The ethics of it as a framework stays the same. The equity issue stays the same. And I think there's that powerful thing where we need to stop putting band-aids in places for these giant rollouts of technology, and we need to commit to that shared language and framework of, hey, why are we doing this? How does this provide more access? How does this make things more equitable? And if we just had, really, they're pretty simple sentences you can put together just to ask yourself to start that conversation. Because I think there are many people here, and I think people that will be watching this, that have admin that just don't have the bandwidth. Everything is top down, and they're getting it from the top, from their admin, from that admin. We need a plan, we need a policy, and they're just like, I have been principal for 35 years. I have no idea what any of this is. I don't know where to start. And I think that's that scary piece of it for a lot of people. And so you sort of touched on this, Ken, a little bit, and I'll throw this out. Um, what are some overlooked ethical concerns when schools adopt new AI technology? So you touched on it briefly, Ken, at the very end, that sort of imposter syndrome. But what are some of those overlooked ones that people maybe aren't even thinking about that should be thinking about?
Free is not free.
Which I will follow up with. If the product is free, then you're the product.
Analyze the terms of service. I know people don't read it, but don't blame them. There's a reason why they're very long and they're language inaccessible. Use AI to help you with that. Ask the right questions. Oftentimes, I've been around ed tech this whole century. Oftentimes, the sales pitch is what I describe as a hammer looking for a nail. I'm going to tell you what it does, even if that doesn't necessarily meet the needs that you have. And I might even play a popularity game of, well, these school districts are doing it, so you need to get on board with them. So it's asking the right questions, and it's also, to me, it's also demanding degrees of transparency. How does the platform operate? What are the caveats that I need to be concerned about? What does it look like in practical and contextual use cases? I really wish that paradigm would get shifted to where school district leaders would ask the tougher questions, so that when they do make a decision, if I'm an adult caregiver in that education community and I show up in a board meeting and in public comment, I ask for what was the vetting process around selection of a particular platform. I don't even have to do an open records request for it. This is what we determine are our goals. These were the resources we have. These were the needs based on those resources. And that's why we thoughtfully and strategically selected the platforms we're using, that we're going to empower the teachers and the learners in our entire school district to use in a thoughtful and practical way.
And I think that is the big one, the questions, because before I joined School AI, I was asking these questions and ran the AI task force at my school and asked a lot of different potential partners these questions, like, well, what's your privacy policy? Like, but tell me what it means for my student with an IEP that's going to utilize your platform. Where's that data going? If that salesperson, whoever's talking, did not have an answer, immediately done. I was like, done. I'm like, sorry. Like, if that is a number one and should be one of the number one questions anyone is asking is, what's going to happen to my student data? Who's using it? How's it being used? And one of the things that I loved about school I eventually joined up was they had these answers like, oh, COPA forever compliant, we can't see it, it's encrypted, it goes out, it's encrypted, it comes back, it's encrypted. These are the language models that we use for this. This is the language models we use for that. And I'm like, dang, I'm like a customer. Like, you're telling me like all of these. I thought this was like the inside stuff you're only supposed to go, no, we don't hide any of this stuff. You need to know this. Like, this is important. And so when you have that open approach to it, it really does make you go, okay, this does sound like a company founded by a teacher who has worked in ed tech and knows that these are the bits of information that are important. And so what you guys say is so true, because I'm always shocked when I have different meetings with different decision makers, and I'm like, they're not going to ask me about the large language model we're using. Like, and so you provide that information. They go, oh, okay, and then you write it down. And I'm like, people don't know what questions they should even be asking. And I think, how do we even do that? Does that go back to this framework we're talking about? Like, how do you know the questions you don't know that you need to know? And that little, Dunning-Kruger effect. Yeah. Like, how do you know it? Like, where do we go for that? And I think there's maybe too much trust. I don't know if that's what it is. Anyone feel free to jump in on that one. I don't have the answer to that one. I wish I did.
I won't answer that directly, but I will bring up something else that Ken would likely have said if he, because these are where our conversations go, and that is to also consider, sure, a school and a teacher and even a caretaker may evaluate what particular tool that a school has approved or a district has approved for them to use based on the questions that were asked. Then there's another question, and that is the teacher utilizing another tool that does not follow the same level of discrepancy for checking to see if a student cheated, right? Has there been any form of interrogation into what are these various tools, what are the terms and services of those tools, and have students and or caretakers given permission for their work and their personal identifiable information to be inserted in these so-called checkers that also are regularly, very fallible and also create massive chasms of distrust between student and teacher if they are falsely accused. All of those sort of things, those are part of the conversation as well. Regularly, there might be school approved tools for students to use, school approved tools for teachers to use, and then there's some form of asterisk next to certain tools that are to check to see if a student cheated that falls between the cracks. And those questions need to be asked as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty spot on there. And I think when we're looking at all of these practices and best practices, it leads me to that next question, because we've really been talking about almost like the admin side of things, right? The teacher ultimately, they're not making the district rollout decision. They might have an opinion and they can share that opinion. But how about as an individual teacher, like what suggestions do you have for that teacher who's like, hey, my district is just, they're going to take 6 to 12 months and I'm not waiting 6 to 12 months. What type of things should they be looking for? Or what, I don't even like the way I'm going to say this, but what is it appropriate for them to use AI? What type of vetting should the individual teacher have in terms of using AI for themselves as part of this process?
I literally just had this conversation with 2 different school districts I work with. You have to be careful about that for the following things. So one, you have to also keep in mind that there are ancillary effects of a teacher doing that. One is, if it is a school district that happens to have an IT division, you are now putting a strain on those folks. One of the questions I ask with many of the districts I work with is if they can pull up a spreadsheet or a dashboard of how many different platforms are used in the school district and to what degree of frequency, and then also what degree of fidelity. And so far, the highest I've seen, which was a very large district, was they had, I think it was like 450 different platforms were being used. Okay, so keep that in mind. So the thing for a teacher is, and again, I don't roll with dunking on teachers because I get it. It's like sometimes the wheels of a school district turn so slow that you'll spend half your career waiting on them to make a decision on something. So I get it. But there's also what I always say to leaders is, if you are going through this process strategically and thoughtfully, you should be communicating that to the educated workforce so they know you're not just sitting there waiting. The ancillary consequence to that, though, is the following: is one is, are you going a mile wide and an inch deep? In other words, I'm going from platform to platform to platform to platform to platform. And if the school is upper grade, so if it's middle or high school, that means that you have students that are having multiple classes where they're using all those different platforms with no degree of fidelity, probably low impact, and over again. You're supposed to be learning. Remember that part too. So I do think with teachers, what I definitely encourage leaders to do is, if you've got that segment of your educator workforce is usually about 10% that are I'm going to dive in, I'm a tech person, I'll evangelize it, blah, blah, blah. Bring them in as a focus group and talk to them. Hey, what platforms have you used? What have you found to be effective? What have you found to be ineffective? And then the big question, how is your use of that platform in alignment with the goals of your class, the school, and the district for the learners? Like, you can empower the folks that do that stuff. Because if they're out trying it out, there's nothing wrong with going and again, treat it like a focus group. But what often happens, unfortunately, is the teachers are not empowered to ask those thoughtful questions. Does it fit within a single sign-on structure? Whose data is being used? How is it being used? Does it require an email address for an account? What are in the terms of service? Again, all of those sorts of things, and it's why I put a comment in there, which I know you all saw it, that LinkedIn post that I did where I went after plagiarism detectors. Like, people talk about, and I've even seen it in the chat, oh, who owns the data? Go and analyze the term of service of their population sectors and watch what you find, and you're not going to like it. And yet, that's an example. I go back to gatekeeping by oppositional authority. You're coercing / requiring a student to submit their paper through this detector that, in their own terms of service, they acknowledge they do not promise the accuracy of the performance, and they take that data. And watch this one. I connect dots here. They share that data with their licensing partners. And you could ask for them to remove it, but they make no guarantees that they will remove it, or even if they say that they'll remove it, they make no guarantees they will remove all of what you request.
Yep. And if I could add just a couple things, I would say from an ethical standpoint, teachers being mindful of if their school or district allows for the use of what I like to refer to as the generalist. They're much more advanced and can do more than just general work. I'm just saying, when you consider that if the school or district utilizes Google or utilizes Microsoft, and if they allow for the AI tool of either of those platforms, then you have an ethical responsibility to only utilize that tool with any information regarding personal identifiable information for yourself as well as for your students. You have an opportunity also in that in using the pro models of those particular tools. That being said, additionally, I always recommend that educators try and experiment with different large language models, really to understand the personalities and some of the strengths and maybe some of your difficulty with understanding how they work requires some experimentation. And the best way I think that all of us can utilize different tools, and just thinking of some of the bigger names and large language models, of course, for the chat GPTs, and add to your list. If you already utilize chat GPT, then please add to your list of Gemini, and add to your list of Claude, add to your list of Perplexity. I would say add to your list at least those. And then the really simple thing that you can do is ask them questions about information a lot of information about already, right? And I think that's a practice that we can do with students, like right in front of them and saying, it's really interesting. We just did this whole unit on such and such. Now watch this. We're going to ask this question over here and look at what the results are. And look for more than just accuracy. Look for the nuance in how it responds. That's an opportunity. Like, I know when I call Ken, I'm asking him, and I know what kinds of ways he's going to respond in advance. And now I'm just like, go off, right? And Ken does that. I might call Nick with a completely different intention because I know Nick's background, I know his perspective and things like that. And I think it's very simple, but I'm still finding 3 years later that schools have not even given those things as sort of basic building blocks for teachers to start to understand how different AI platforms work. So that when I look up, or if I hear, the large language model of a school AI is a chat GPT, for it, like, I have a general understanding of what that is. But if I don't have a general understanding of even what those things are, then I don't even know what's being given to me in return, except for, I'm familiar with that tool. I've heard that name before. So the opportunity to experiment with information that you already know a lot about, diversifying your portfolio, if you will, and being very, very careful of PII. Those are some of the tips that I give for teachers as well.
Wow. Just like real life of talking with my friends about these things. 1 hour has gone by, folks. 1 hour has gone by, and we barely fingernail scratched the surface. I feel like, like we can go so much deeper in so many avenues. To continue this conversation, this is what I'll suggest to the peoples. One, to pick up their book, which will be blocked out because the computer does not want it. It's too good. It fights the AI man and it doesn't want to show it. There it is. Again, the promise and peril of AI in education, ethics, and equity have entered the chat. The link has been posted into the chat. Go and check it out. You can pick it up on Amazon. And again, it'll make you have more questions, which is good. And if these awesome educators that are here now or watch later have more questions, is there any good way to connect with you, Ken and Dee? Ken, go first. Where can people find you on the internet if they want to have these continued conversations?
So I am on the socials. Oftentimes I will post what I would say are more detailed and careful responses. I don't mean careful like be careful. I mean, I give more thought to the response on LinkedIn. So that's where the quote unquote conversation can occur. But you know, I mean, I have a website. I recognize a lot of the names on here, and I would just say that, you know, it's having the conversation when we are able to share the same physical space. It's doing things. I'm going to say this because it's my way of putting it out there on the recording that to commit to it. I reached out to Kim because I want to co-present with Kim at ISTE when it's in Boston, since that's her backyard. So I say that for two reasons. One, because I would like to be able to do that because I know Kim and I have very similar but also layered perspectives on the same thing. And I know that as a, you know, in my case with what Kim and I end up doing, the whole is going to be greater than the sum of the parts. So I think that's another thing to do is it's not just engage in the conversation, but seek out others that, you know, that are of a similar disposition as you, but have different experiences and say, you know, let's collaborate on something, whether it be a webinar or in the case with Kim and I'm looking forward to Kim and I putting together what will be a strong submission for the ISTE program, not this year, but for next year.
Having presented just this FETC with Kim in a panel and a School AI specific session, it was better than I could have ever hoped. I didn't even feel worthy. I'll be honest. Kim is brilliant, and like I said, that perspective that she brings constantly had me go, "Oh yeah!" Like I didn't even see that. It's great. So I'll have to have Kim on as a guest here so we can do a full like 45 minutes to that, Ken. And shout out to Ken. He'll be coming to Michigan for all my Michigan peeps in March. He'll be joining us at our state McCall conference. So if you are in Michigan or on the, let's see, west side-ish of the state, so even Chicago, Indiana area, come up to Grand Rapids. See Ken. Ken, this is your first McCall, isn't it? Yes, first one. So
Yes, it will be. Yes.
I'm excited to see Ken in my great state of Michigan and connect there face to face. Dee, where could people continue to have these conversations with you?
Yeah. So LinkedIn as well is probably the easiest way just to find me. If you happen to, speaking of utilizing AI, asking a question about something you know a lot about, I asked Gemini, you know, who is Dee Lanier and how do I get in contact with them? It gave good summative information about who I am, and then it gave a lot of false information of how to get in contact with me. So there's another opportunity to you know, explore your AI literacy and to check for misinformation. But yeah, LinkedIn is easy. If you do a good old fashioned Google search, then typically information is easier to find there. But also, we put the link in the chat for at least my website that has books. And so both of our books are there, and my contact information is on this site as
well. That's awesome. I mean, I highly recommend you check them out. Follow them on LinkedIn. Check out their posts. Check out what they're sharing. Dee, are you presenting anywhere in the upcoming future? You're going to be at TCEA, correct?
Yeah, we'll be at TCEA, definitely there. Ken and I are both actually going to be featured presenters at NC Ties, so we'll be there. So those are the things that are coming up next.
Excellent. So there you go for people. If you're going to be in North Carolina, you're going to be in Texas, check out there. For those of you that love this,
with us.
Get coffee. There you go. Get coffee.
I will serve you coffee if you see me in the flesh. This is true story.
It is no joke. It is legit. And these friendships I formed are with real people that are just like, hey, let's talk about education. And those are the people you want to talk to. Those are the people you want to listen to. Those people that will stop and be like, hey, what do you think? And it's changed my life and my trajectory in a lot of different ways. I know they'll be modest and go, oh no, but I really take to heart what so many of my PLN, as we used to call it back in the day, said and helped change, who I am as a teacher and a learner and a thinker. And, these relationships have become strong friendships. And I've been very blessed to have you guys in my life. For those of you new to Connecting the Dots webinar events that we do, if you're like this, you're like, oh man, this is actually pretty cool. We've had other conversations. Back in October, Kristen Zimke from Chicago area talked about reading, writing, and thinking in the connected world. We had our CEO, Caleb, last month in December, just talking about that whole process of why he decided to do this as a teacher and his journey to accomplish that. Let's see, November was Adam Bello from Breakout EDU and just talking about the value of AI in the world of coding. What does that look like now that you can vibe code? That is a very different world than those of us that put ourselves through the joy of learning Python coding and trying to do that. And now I can vibe code that. It's way easier for this dyslexic fellow. So if you're interested in that, you can find those in our community. Reach out to me, Nicholas at schoolai.com. If you have questions or thoughts or ideas, this recording will be posted on the event page. I'll have a link that goes out to all of our champions next Monday that'll feature it in it. I don't know. It seems like this might have to just be a part one of a later part two because we can dive so much deeper, gentlemen. And I can't thank you enough for your time. Ken, safe travels to you. I know people in Mexico are having an amazing day with you tomorrow. And Dee, safe travels to you as you head off to Texas in another week or so. And then back to North Carolina. So thank you all so very much. Again, if you have questions and stuff like that, message them to me, reach out to Ken and Dee on the interwebs, and they'll be more than happy to connect with you. But otherwise, thank you all so very much for your time, and I hope everyone has a wonderful evening.
Appreciate y'all so much.
Thank you for being here.